My son brazenly sold my apartment for $1.2 million without telling me anything, then handed me a check for a measly $15,000 and cynically said, "Go buy yourself a room in some dump on the outskirts." He imagined me as a helpless old man, and I laughed in his face. He had no idea what I had done a few days before. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The front door slammed shut with a finality that made the old house shudder. Austin stood in my living room, his expensive Italian leather briefcase catching the afternoon light, streaming through windows I'd cleaned just that morning. His charcoal suit probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I sold the house. The words hit me like ice water. No greeting, no explanation. Just 4 words that turned my world upside down. I looked up from my newspaper, still processing what he'd said. "What do you mean, sold?" Austin's jaw tightened as he pulled out a thick stack of legal documents from his briefcase. The papers rustled as he dropped them onto my coffee table, right on top of the crossword puzzle I'd been working on. His gold watch glinted as he reached for his Mont Blanc pen. The deed's already transferred. Settlement was yesterday. His voice carried that same cold efficiency he used with his business clients. "I've prepared everything you need to know." My hands trembled as I reached for the papers. The letterhead read, "Morrison and Associates Real Estate." Below it, in bold black letters, "Final Sale Agreement, 847 Maple Street." Our address. My address for 30 years. "Austin, this is my home. You can't just—" "I can, and I did," he interrupted, checking his Rolex with practiced indifference. "I'm the legal owner, remember? You signed it over to me 3 years ago for tax purposes." The memory hit me like a physical blow. I'd trusted him completely back then. My accountant had suggested the transfer to help with estate planning. Austin had promised nothing would change, that it was just paperwork. Just paperwork. "But you said—" "I said a lot of things." Austin pulled out his checkbook, the leather cover worn smooth from use. "Look, I'm not heartless. I'm giving you $15,000. He tore off the check with a sharp rip and placed it on top of the legal documents. The amount seemed to mock me from the pale blue paper. $15,000 for the house where he'd grown up, where I'd raised him after his mother died, where I'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities. "There's a place I found for you," Austin continued, his tone suggesting he was doing me a tremendous favor. "It's a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Rent's cheap, perfect for someone in your situation." "My situation?" The words came out as a whisper. "Come on, Dad. Be realistic." Austin snapped his briefcase shut with a metallic click. "You're 65, retired, living on Social Security. You can't maintain this place anymore. The roof needs work. The plumbing's ancient. This way, you get a fresh start without the burden." Burden. The word echoed in my head like a bell tolling. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "Burden? This house isn't a burden. It's my home. It's an expense you can't afford." Austin straightened his tie, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was lying about breaking something. "Sarah and I have been discussing this for months. We both agree it's the best solution for everyone." Sarah. Of course she was involved. His wife had been pushing him to distance himself from me, ever since they got married. I'd seen it in her eyes at every family dinner, every holiday gathering, the calculation, the way she looked at everything I owned like she was already dividing it up. For everyone? My voice was rising now, 30 years of suppressed frustration breaking through. How exactly does throwing your father out of his home benefit everyone? Austin's expression didn't change. If anything, he seemed bored by my emotional response. "You're being dramatic. It's a business decision. The house is worth $400,000. After paying off your remaining mortgage and expenses, I'm left with about $350. I'm giving you 15 grand of that. That's more than generous." Generous? I could feel my face burning, my hands clenching into fists. "You're taking my home and giving me pocket change, and you call that generous? You're getting a free place to live and cash in hand." Austin glanced at his watch again. Most people would be grateful. Grateful. After everything I'd done for him. After working 2 jobs to pay for his college, after going without vacations, new clothes, decent food so he could have piano lessons, soccer camps, the best of everything. After spending every penny I had to make sure he never wanted for anything. I sacrificed everything for you. The words exploded out of me. Everything! And this is how you repay me? Austin finally showed emotion, irritation. That was your choice. I never asked you to sacrifice anything. You ungrateful. I stopped myself, breathing hard. Get out. Fine. Austin picked up his briefcase, completely unmoved by my anger. You have 30 days to vacate. The new owners want possession by mid-May. He walked toward the door with the same casual confidence he'd entered with, pausing only to look back over his shoulder. Oh, and Dad? Try to be practical about this. Fighting it won't change anything. The papers are already signed. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone with the legal documents and that insulting check. Through the window, I watched him climb into his BMW, the engine purring to life like a satisfied cat. He didn't look back at the house, our house, as he drove away. I sank back into my chair, staring at the check in my hands. $15,000, the amount I used to make in a month, back when I was building something Austin would never understand. Back when I was creating an empire he didn't even know existed. The sound of high heels on my front porch cut through the silence. Sarah pushed through the door without knocking, her designer handbag swinging as she surveyed the scene. Her perfectly styled blonde hair caught the light as she took in the legal documents scattered across my coffee table. "How did it go?" she asked Austin, though her eyes were already calculating the answer from the tension in the room. Austin straightened his shoulders, suddenly more confident with reinforcement. "Exactly as planned. Dad's being emotional about it." Emotional. As if 30 years of raising him single-handedly was just an inconvenient feeling to be dismissed. Sarah's lips curved into what might have been a smile on someone with actual warmth. "Mr. Young, you have to understand. This is for the best." Her voice carried that condescending tone she'd perfected during our few family gatherings. "Austin and I have discussed this thoroughly. You simply cannot maintain this property at your age." "My age?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "I'm 65, not 90. Sarah exchanged a look with Austin, the kind of look that said they'd rehearsed this conversation. "Let's be practical here. You're living on what? Social Security? Maybe a small pension? This house needs constant repairs you can't afford." Austin nodded along like a bobblehead. "The new apartment we found has maintenance included. No stairs to worry about, no yard work. It's perfect for someone in your position." Someone in my position? They had no idea what my position actually was. If they knew about the 47 car washes generating revenue across California, if they understood the investment portfolio I'd built over 3 decades of careful planning, they might sing a different tune. "Besides," Sarah continued, settling into my armchair as if she owned it, $15,000 is quite generous considering the circumstances. Most people would be grateful for such a thoughtful transition. Thoughtful transition. They were stealing my home and calling it kindness. You planned this. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't Austin's idea. You both planned this together. Austin's jaw tightened. We discussed it, yes. Sarah helped me see that enabling your dependency wasn't helping anyone. Dependency. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. The man I'd sacrificed everything for was calling me dependent while his business struggled with bank loans he couldn't repay. Sarah leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping against the arm of my chair. "Honestly, Mr. Young, you should be relieved. No more property taxes, no more utility bills, no more maintenance headaches. You can focus on enjoying your remaining years." Remaining years. As if they were counting down the days until I became completely irrelevant. "We've already signed the papers," Austin added. "The buyers are eager to close. Fighting this will only create unnecessary legal fees you can't afford." They had it all figured out. Every angle covered, every protest anticipated. They'd reduce me to a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be managed. "Look at it this way." Sarah's voice took on that fake sweetness she used when talking to children or people she considered simple. "You raised Austin to be successful and independent. This is proof of how well you did. He's making smart financial decisions. Smart financial decisions. Like over-leveraging his business and stealing from his father." Austin checked his watch again, that same dismissive gesture that had infuriated me earlier. "We need to go. Sarah has a dinner reservation at 7. A dinner reservation. They'd planned to celebrate after destroying my life. Sarah stood, smoothing down her skirt with practiced elegance. "The apartment manager expects you next week to sign the lease. I've already put down the deposit as a gesture of goodwill." Of course she had. They'd planned every detail of my exile while I'd been completely oblivious. Austin moved toward the door, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floors. I'd refinished myself 5 years ago. "Dad, try to see this as a new beginning. Fresh start, less responsibility." Less responsibility. From the man who'd never taken responsibility for anything in his life. Sarah paused at the door, looking back at me with what might have been pity on someone capable of genuine emotion. "Oh, and Mr. Young, the cleaners come Tuesday to prepare the house for staging. Please have your personal items sorted by then." The door closed behind them with a soft finality, leaving me alone with the echo of their footsteps and the weight of their assumptions. Through the window, I watched Austin help Sarah into his BMW, their movements casual and unhurried. They drove away without looking back, probably already discussing their dinner plans, completely satisfied with how easily they'd disposed of me. Silence filled the house like water rushing into a sinking ship. I stood motionless in my living room, the $15,000 check trembling between my fingers. The paper felt lighter than air, yet somehow carried the weight of 30 years' betrayal. $15,000. I stared at the amount until the numbers blurred. Austin had no idea, none whatsoever, what this represented. The graduation photo on my mantelpiece caught my eye. Austin in his cap and gown, grinning beside his Stanford diploma. 4 years at one of the most expensive universities in the country. I remembered writing those tuition checks with aching clarity. $45,000 per year, every semester, punctual as clockwork. $180,000 total. Back then, I'd worked 16-hour days managing 3 car wash locations personally. My hands were perpetually dry from soap and chemicals. My back ached from bending over engines, but Austin needed the best education money could buy. He'd called me every few weeks, casual as ordering coffee. "Dad, I need money for books. Dad, can you help with my laptop? Dad, the fraternity has this networking event." Each request granted without hesitation, each sacrifice made gladly. Moving to my desk, I pulled out the bottom drawer where I kept old financial records. There it was. The folder labeled Austin's business investment, $75,000. I'd liquidated my emergency savings in 2019 when he'd pitched his revolutionary consulting concept. "This is going to change everything, Dad," he'd promised, eyes bright with entrepreneurial fever. "I'll pay you back within 2 years, guaranteed." The check had cleared on a Tuesday. The promise evaporated like morning fog. My fingers traced through more documents. Annual statements showing regular transfers. $15,000 every December for 15 consecutive years. Christmas gifts, I'd called them. Help with life, Austin had termed them. $225,000 in help that never required repayment, never came with gratitude, never seemed to register as anything more than his due. He'd accepted each transfer with the casual entitlement of someone collecting their salary. "Thanks, Dad. This really helps with the mortgage." Never acknowledging the strain it put on my budget, never wondering how a supposedly poor retiree managed such generosity year after year. The irony burned in my throat. Austin was offering me back 1 year's worth of what I'd given him freely for over a decade. Wandering back to the living room, I calculated the housing costs. Austin had lived in this house rent-free until age 35, market rate for this neighborhood, $32,100 per month. 12 years of free housing, $460,800, add utilities, maintenance, food, car insurance I'd paid until he turned 30. The numbers kept climbing in my head like a slot machine jackpot in reverse. College tuition, $180,000. Our business investment, $75,000. Annual gifts, $225,000. Free housing and expenses, roughly $500,000. Conservative estimate. I'd invested nearly $1 million in Austin's life and future. His gratitude, stealing my home and offering me pocket change for my exile. I crushed the check in my fist, then smoothed it out again on the coffee table. The paper crinkled like dried leaves, the ink smearing slightly from my sweaty palm. For 3 decades, I'd treated Austin like the son every father dreams of raising. I'd given him opportunities, education, financial security, unconditional support. He'd repaid me by treating me like an inconvenient expense to be eliminated. The house felt different now, smaller, emptier, already belonging to strangers. Every piece of furniture held memories of sacrifice. The second-hand couch I'd bought because Austin needed college money. The old television I'd kept for years because his tuition took priority. The worn carpet I'd never replaced because his business needed funding. Standing up, I walked to the window where I'd watched their BMW disappear. They were probably at some expensive restaurant right now, celebrating their clever solution to the Roger problem. Sarah was likely congratulating Austin on his business acumen, while they toasted with wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. 3 decades of building something they couldn't comprehend. 3 decades of strategic patience they'd never suspected. 3 decades of careful planning they'd never bothered to investigate. Austin thought he was discarding a helpless old man. Sarah believed she was disposing of an inconvenient burden. Neither of them realized they'd just declared war on someone who'd been quietly building an empire while they slept. Walking toward my home office, I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger anymore, but something colder, more calculating. They thought they'd caught me completely off guard. They had no idea I'd been expecting this betrayal for exactly 1 week. April 8th. The memory surfaced with crystal clarity. I'd been in my kitchen making dinner when Austin's voice drifted through the thin walls. He was on the living room couch, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in that conspiratorial whisper people use when they think they're alone. "No, Sarah, he won't see it coming." Austin's voice carried a smugness that made my stomach turn. The old man's completely clueless about his own situation. I'd frozen mid-chop, the onion forgotten on my cutting board. "Getting rid of him is the smart move," Austin continued. "We take the house, set him up somewhere cheap, and finally stop this ridiculous burden. Dad's becoming dead weight." Dead weight. My own son, discussing my disposal like a piece of unwanted furniture. Trust me, he'll be grateful in the end. We frame it as helping him simplify his life. Austin's laugh was cold, calculating. 15 grand should keep him quiet. That's more money than he's probably seen in years. The knife had trembled in my hand as Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker, though I couldn't make out her words. Exactly. Once we get power of attorney, we can clean up all his messy finances. Who knows what other debts he's hiding? Austin's voice grew more animated. "The house sale closes next week. We'll present it as a done deal, give him the token payment, and move him out before he can cause problems." That night, I'd barely slept. But by morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. April 10th. James Chen's law office smelled like leather and old books, exactly the kind of place where serious business got handled quietly. I'd called him first thing that morning, and he'd squeeze me in between other appointments. "Roger, you sounded upset on the phone." James leaned forward across his mahogany desk, his expression concerned. "What's going on?" "I need to protect my assets from family interference." The words came out steadier than I felt. "Someone close to me is planning to take advantage of what they think is my financial vulnerability." James raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask for specifics. That's why I trusted him for 15 years. "What kind of protection are you thinking?" "Complete separation. I want my business holdings legally shielded from any claims, inheritance disputes, or power of attorney attempts." I pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Everything needs to be bulletproof. For 2 hours, we'd worked through documentation, asset protection trusts, business ownership verification. Clear legal barriers preventing family members from accessing or claiming any part of my holdings. James had been thorough, professional, and discreet. "This creates an impenetrable wall around your primary assets," he'd explained, sliding the final documents across his desk. "No one can touch your business empire or personal holdings without your explicit consent. Even family members would need to go through multiple legal challenges that would take years and cost them more than they could ever recover." I'd signed everything with steady hands, knowing I was building a fortress they'd never breach. "Is there anything else you need to discuss?" James had asked, clearly sensing there was more to the story. "Not yet," I'd told him, "but I might need your services again soon." Now, standing in my home office on the evening of April 15th, I pulled out the legal documents James had prepared. Every page was perfect, every protection airtight. Austin and Sarah thought they were dealing with a helpless old man with no resources and no options. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who owned 47 profitable businesses across California. Someone who'd spent decades building an empire while they slept. Someone who'd anticipated their betrayal and prepared accordingly. The irony was delicious. While Austin struggled with bank loans and business debts, while Sarah plotted to steal what she thought were my meager possessions, I sat on assets worth more than they could imagine. Tomorrow, I would begin teaching them exactly how wrong they were. Tonight, I would plan their education very carefully. Dawn broke gray and determined, matching my mood perfectly. I'd slept better than I had in weeks, my mind finally clear about what needed to happen. After 30 years of building my empire in shadows, it was time to step into the light, strategically, of course. By 7:30, I was dressed in my best Navy suit, the one I wore for serious business meetings. Austin had no idea I owned anything besides jeans and old work shirts. Today, he'd begin learning how much he didn't know about his father. The drive to First National took 20 minutes through morning traffic. I'd chosen this bank carefully, the same institution where Austin had bragged about securing his business loan 2 years ago. During that celebratory dinner, he'd mentioned the manager by name, the loan amount, even the payment schedule, information I'd filed away without him noticing. Mr. Young. The receptionist's face lit up with genuine warmth as I approached the marble counter. How wonderful to see you. Are you here for a deposit, or would you like to speak with someone about your accounts? My car wash businesses had been banking here for 15 years. Weekly deposits of $50,000 to $70,000 per location created the kind of relationship that opened doors quickly. I need to speak with Mr. Harrison about a family matter. Is he available? Of course. Let me check his calendar. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. He can see you in 10 minutes. Would you like coffee while you wait? Harrison's office smelled of expensive leather and success. Awards lined the walls, photos of him with local business leaders, certificates of banking excellence. The kind of office where serious financial decisions got made daily. Roger, good to see you. Harrison stood, extending his hand with the warm familiarity reserved for major clients. What brings you in today? Everything okay with the car wash accounts? The business accounts are fine. I'm here about a personal matter involving my son. I settled into the leather chair across from his desk. Austin Young. I believe he has a loan with your institution. Harrison's expression shifted to professional caution. I can't discuss specific customer information, you understand? I'm not asking for details. I'm here as a concerned father, and more importantly, as a long-standing client of this bank. I leaned forward slightly. Yesterday, my son informed me he'd sold my house without my knowledge or consent. He offered me $15,000 as compensation for what he called my burden. The banker's eyebrows rose. That sounds concerning. Austin believes I'm a poor retiree with no assets or business connections. He's been systematically planning to eliminate what he sees as his financial responsibility toward me. I kept my voice steady, professional. I'm worried about what this behavior says regarding his character and business judgment. Harrison pulled up something on his computer screen, his expression growing more serious. Character is certainly a factor we consider in our ongoing lending relationships. I've been banking here for 15 years, maintaining substantial business accounts, building relationships based on trust and mutual respect. I gestured toward the window overlooking the business district. My son, however, appears to view family obligations as inconvenient expenses to be eliminated through deception. These are serious concerns, Roger. Harrison's fingers drummed against his desk, particularly given some recent irregularities in the account you mentioned. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Austin's financial troubles were worse than I'd suspected. What would you recommend from a business perspective? I asked. If someone showed such disregard for family obligations, such willingness to deceive and manipulate, how might that reflect on their business dealings? Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying his computer screen. Well, character assessments are part of our risk management protocols. When borrowers demonstrate patterns of deceptive behavior or financial irresponsibility, I understand completely. I stood up, straightening my tie. I simply wanted to share my concerns as both a father and a valued client. Whatever decisions you make regarding your lending policies are entirely your professional judgment. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Roger. Harrison stood as well, his expression thoughtful. Would you mind if I asked a few follow-up questions about your son's recent behavior patterns? For the next 20 minutes, I provided a calm, factual account of Austin's actions. No emotional manipulation, no dramatic appeals, just a strategic professional conversation between two businessmen discussing risk assessment. Thank you for this information, Harrison said finally. I'll need to review our lending policies regarding this account. Standard procedure, you understand. Of course, I trust your professional judgment completely. As I shook his hand goodbye, I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. Austin's loan would be getting very close scrutiny very soon. Walking back to my car, I felt the first genuine satisfaction I'd experienced in days. Austin thought he was dealing with a helpless old man. Instead, he'd just declared war on someone who understood exactly how to use legitimate business relationships to achieve justice. By tomorrow, he'd receive his first lesson in the difference between the two. 3 days of careful gardening and household maintenance had filled my time nicely while I waited for the inevitable. When Austin's Honda pulled into my driveway on Friday afternoon, I watched from my kitchen window with the satisfaction of a chess player seeing his opponent make the predicted move. This time, he knocked. "Dad?" His voice carried none of the arrogance from our last encounter. Can we talk?" I opened the door to find a different man than the one who delivered my eviction notice. Austin's usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled, dark circles shadowed his eyes. The confident businessman had been replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Of course. Come in." I stepped aside, maintaining the same calm tone I'd use with any visitor. Austin settled onto the same couch where he'd once sat, smugly explaining my disposal. Now he fidgeted with his wedding ring, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. "I got a call from the bank on Tuesday." He rubbed his face with both hands. "They want the full loan amount. Immediately. $200,000. I raised my eyebrows in mild surprise. That seems unusual. They said there were concerns about my character and business judgment. Austin's voice cracked slightly. They're demanding repayment within 30 days, or they'll begin foreclosure proceedings on my office building. Character concerns? I kept my tone neutral, curious. The expansion I told you about last year, the new equipment, the premium office space in downtown San Jose, it was supposed to triple our revenue. Austin's words tumbled out faster now. I leveraged everything. The monthly payments were manageable when clients were paying on time, but 3 major contracts fell through in February. He stood up, pacing to the window where he'd once watched me receive his $15,000 insult. I've sold everything I can. The Rolex, Sarah's jewelry, my vintage guitars. Even traded the BMW for a basic Honda. His laugh was bitter. Raised about $30,000, but I'm still $170 short. The irony was exquisite. Austin had calculated my worth at $15,000, and now he needed more than 10 times that amount to save himself. She's talking about leaving. Austin's voice dropped to a whisper. She said she didn't sign up to be married to a failure who can't even keep a roof over their heads. She gave me until the end of the month to fix this, or she's filing for divorce. I watched him crumble, this man who'd called me a burden just days ago. That's unfortunate. Dad, I know I hurt you with how I handled the house situation. Austin turned back to face me, desperation stark in his eyes. I realized now that I was insensitive about your feelings. Insensitive, as if stealing my home was merely a social misstep. I'm asking for your help. I know you don't have much, but if you could loan me whatever you can manage, I'll pay you back with interest. I'll put it in writing, make it legal, whatever you want. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Austin waited, hope flickering in his expression, as he searched my face for any sign of sympathy or willingness to help. No. The word came out flat, final. Austin blinked. No? I don't have the resources to help you with this kind of financial crisis. I stood up, smoothing down my shirt. As you recently pointed out, I'm just a poor retiree living on Social Security. $15,000 was more money than I'd seen in years, remember? The color drained from Austin's face as his own words came back to haunt him. But, Dad, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. I walked toward the front door, my movement making it clear the conversation was over. You're in exactly the position you put me in 3 days ago. The only difference is that no one's offering you pocket change to ease the transition. Austin followed me to the door, his composure finally cracking completely. Please, you're my father. You're the only person left who might help me. I opened the door, cool afternoon air flowing into the house. You made it very clear that our relationship was a business transaction. You terminated that relationship. Now you'll need to find business solutions elsewhere. Dad, please. Goodbye, Austin. He stood in my doorway for a moment longer, perhaps hoping I'd change my mind, perhaps realizing for the first time that actions have consequences. Then he walked to his modest Honda, started the engine, and drove away. I closed the door and returned to my kitchen window, watching until his car disappeared around the corner. 2 days of watching Austin's Honda drive past my house twice daily, hoping for some sign of forgiveness, no doubt, convinced me it was time for the next lesson. Sunday afternoon seemed perfect for a field trip. I called him at noon. Austin, would you like to take a drive with me? There's something I want to show you. His voice carried desperate hope. Of course, Dad. Whatever you want. 30 minutes later, Austin sat in my passenger seat as we drove toward the industrial district on the south side of San Jose. He kept stealing glances at me, probably wondering if this meant reconciliation was possible. Where are we going? He asked as we turned onto Commerce Boulevard. You'll see. The large blue sign came into view first. Young's Premium Car Wash, family owned since 1995. Austin's eyes widened as he read it, then flicked to me with confusion. Dad, there's someone with our last name who... No, I interrupted gently, pulling into the manager's parking space. There isn't. Marcus Rodriguez, my site manager for the past 8 years, approached my car with his usual professional smile. Mr. Young, good to see you. Everything running smoothly today? Austin's mouth fell open as Marcus addressed me with obvious familiarity and respect. Everything looks excellent, Marcus. This is my son, Austin. I thought I'd give him a tour of the operation. Wonderful. Your dad's built something really special here, Austin. We're processing about 400 cars daily now. 400 cars. At an average of $25 per wash, that meant $10,000 in daily revenue from this location alone. Austin's calculator brain was obviously working overtime as we walked toward the facility entrance. The operation hummed with efficient precision. 8 wash bays operated simultaneously. Conveyor systems moving vehicles through automated processes, while teams of employees handled detailing and customer service. Electronic displays showed real-time revenue tracking, customer satisfaction scores, equipment performance metrics. This is impressive, Austin managed, watching a luxury sedan emerge spotless from Bay 3. We've been perfecting the process for 3 decades, I explained calmly. Started with 1 location in 1995, added 2 more by 2000, then expanded systematically across the Bay Area. Austin stopped walking. Expanded? How many locations? I pulled out my phone, opening the business management app that tracked all 47 sites in real time. Revenue numbers, customer counts, operational status, everything displayed in neat columns of data. 47 locations currently, from San Francisco to San Diego, with concentrations in every major metropolitan area. I handed him the phone. Each one generates between $7,000 and $12,000 daily, depending on location and season. Austin stared at the screen, his face pale as he scrolled through the financial summary. Daily network revenue, $423,000. Monthly totals in the millions. Annual gross revenue approaching $50 million. You own all of these? His voice was barely a whisper. Built them one at a time over 30 years. Never took investors, never borrowed beyond initial equipment, financing that was paid off within 18 months per location. I retrieved my phone, closing the app with the same casual motion I'd used to check the weather. But how? I mean, you always seemed... Austin's words trailed off as the magnitude hit him. Seemed what? Poor? Struggling? I gestured toward the bustling operation around us. I dressed simply, drove modest cars, lived in the same house for decades. None of that prevented me from building this. Austin leaned against a concrete pillar, looking like he might be sick. When I asked you for help with the 200,000, you could have written that check without thinking about it. Without thinking about it, I confirmed. I could have written 10 such checks, 20 if necessary. The silence stretched between us as Austin processed what he'd discovered. His father, the man he'd dismissed as a burden, the poor retiree he'd planned to warehouse in budget housing, owned a business empire worth tens of millions of dollars. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "Why would I asked simply. "You never asked about my work, never showed interest in my life beyond what I could provide for yours. You assumed poverty based on my appearance and used that assumption to justify treating me as an inconvenience." Austin's legs seemed to give out. He slid down the pillar until he was sitting on the concrete, head in his hands. "I need to get home," he said finally. "I need to think." "Of course." I started walking toward the car. "Marcus, we'll be leaving now. Keep up the excellent work." "Always a pleasure, Mr. Young." "Austin, nice meeting you." Austin followed me to the car like a sleepwalker, barely responding to Marcus's farewell. During the drive home, he stared out the window in complete silence, occasionally shaking his head as if trying to wake up from a dream. When I dropped him off at his house, he paused with his hand on the door handle. "Dad, There's nothing to say right now," I interrupted. "Go home to Sarah. Explain to her what you've learned today, then decide what you want to do with this information." Tuesday morning brought Austin back to my door, but this time he carried himself differently. Gone was the desperate supplicant from last week. In his place stood a man who believed he'd found a new angle. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation," he began, settling into my living room with renewed confidence. "I approached this all wrong before. I was asking for charity when I should have been proposing a business relationship." I poured myself coffee and listened with apparent interest. "You've built something incredible over 30 years. I respect that now." Austin leaned forward, his entrepreneur's enthusiasm returning. "What I need isn't a handout. It's an introduction to your network, business relationships, strategic partnerships." "You want me to make introductions?" "Exactly. You know successful people, investors, business leaders. If you could arrange a few meetings, I could present my expansion plans properly. My company has solid fundamentals. I just need the right capital partner." The request was reasonable, logical, and exactly what I'd anticipated. I suppose I could arrange something. Let me make a few calls. By Thursday afternoon, I'd scheduled lunch with David Chen, James's brother, who ran a successful investment firm. Austin dressed carefully for the meeting, carrying a polished presentation folder and exuding the confidence of someone who believed his luck was finally changing. "David, I'd like you to meet my son, Austin," I said, as we sat down at the exclusive downtown restaurant David preferred. "He's the one I mentioned with the consulting business." David shook Austin's hand warmly. "Roger speaks very highly of your business acumen. Tell me about your company." Austin launched into his pitch with practiced enthusiasm. Revenue projections, market analysis, expansion strategies. He presented everything professionally and persuasively. David listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about scalability and competitive advantages. "This sounds promising," David said during a natural pause. "Roger, you must be proud of Austin's entrepreneurial spirit." "Oh, absolutely. Austin has always been focused on financial success." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "In fact, David, I should mention that Austin recently demonstrated remarkable business discipline. He made the difficult decision to sell his father's house to optimize his cash flow position." Austin's face went pale, but I continued in the same conversational tone. "He offered me $15,000 for a property worth $400,000, explaining that someone in my financial position should be grateful for such generosity. Quite strategic thinking, maximizing asset extraction while minimizing cost exposure." David's expression shifted from interest to concern. "He sold your house?" Austin viewed our relationship through a purely business lens. Family obligations as burdens to be minimized, elderly parents as expensive liabilities. I smiled at Austin, whose confidence was visibly deflating. It shows a certain ruthless business mindset, doesn't it? The lunch concluded politely, but without any investment offer. David cited alignment concerns and cultural fit issues before making his excuses to leave early. Friday brought a similar meeting with Patricia Williams, who owned a chain of tech incubators. Again, Austin pitched professionally. Again, I waited for the right moment to share context about his character. Austin certainly understands cost-benefit analysis, I told Patricia during dessert. He calculated that caring for an aging father was financially inefficient, so he developed a solution to eliminate that expense entirely. Eliminate? Patricia's eyebrows rose. Well, when Austin discovered his father was becoming what he called dead weight, he arranged to relocate him to budget housing on the outskirts of town. Quite clever resource reallocation, actually. Patricia declined to schedule a follow-up meeting. By the following Tuesday, Austin had begun to recognize the pattern. Each meeting started promisingly, then deteriorated after I shared family context. Each potential partner lost interest once they understood Austin's approach to family obligations. "Dad, we need to talk," Austin said after our third failed introduction. His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before, suspicion mixed with growing desperation. "Of course. How can I help? Are you telling these people things specifically to sabotage me?" I looked genuinely puzzled. "I'm sharing relevant character information. These are business relationships built on trust, Austin. People want to know who they're dealing with. But the way you tell it makes me sound like someone who treats family members as business expenses to be optimized." I shrugged. "Austin, I'm simply describing your actual behavior. If that creates concerns for potential partners, perhaps the issue isn't my storytelling." Austin stared at me, the full realization finally crystallizing. His father wasn't helping him network. He was systematically destroying every opportunity. Friday evening brought Austin to my door again, but this time I barely recognized the man standing on my porch. The confident entrepreneur had been replaced by someone who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. His clothes hung loose, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook as he raised them to knock. "Dad." His voice cracked on the single word. Can I come in? I have nowhere else to go." I stepped aside wordlessly, watching him shuffle into my living room like a wounded animal seeking shelter. He collapsed onto the couch where he'd once sat, smugly planning my exile, now broken and hollow. "Sarah filed for divorce yesterday." The words tumbled out without preamble. She said she couldn't watch me destroy everything we'd built together. Couldn't stand being married to someone who'd lost everything because he was too proud to maintain family relationships. I poured myself a glass of water and listened. She took the last of our joint savings for a security deposit on her own apartment, said she needed to protect herself financially before I dragged her down completely. Austin's laugh was bitter and broken. 22 years together, Dad. Since college. She was my best friend, my partner, my everything, and she walked away like I was a stranger. That must be difficult. Difficult? Austin looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Dad, she was the only person who knew me completely, the only person who supported my dreams, who believed in my potential. Now she looks at me like I'm some kind of failure she's embarrassed to have been associated with." He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening street. "It's not just Sarah. Everyone's gone." His voice dropped to a whisper. "My business partner terminated our agreement yesterday. Said my reputation issues were creating liability for the company. My assistant quit without giving notice. Even my accountant stopped returning my calls." I remained silent, watching him process the full extent of his isolation. You know what the worst part is? The friends. People I've known for 15 years, people who came to my wedding, who celebrated every business success with me. They're all suddenly too busy to take my calls. Austin pressed his forehead against the glass. I realized none of them were actually my friends. They were networking contacts who enjoyed associating with success. Social relationships often have transactional elements. Austin turned back to face me, desperation stark in his expression. "Marcus Chen, David's nephew, remember him? We played golf every month for 5 years. Yesterday I ran into him at the grocery store. He pretended not to see me, Dad. Literally turned around and walked the other way rather than acknowledge I existed." The silence stretched between us. Austin's breathing was ragged, emotional exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "I went to Jake Morrison's birthday party last weekend. You remember Jake? We were roommates in college, best man at each other's weddings. When I walked in, the entire conversation stopped. 20 people just stared at me like I was some kind of contagious disease. Austin's voice broke completely. Jake pulled me aside after 5 minutes and asked me to leave, said my presence was making his other guests uncomfortable. I watched my son crumble. This man who'd once dismissed me as dead weight, now experiencing what true isolation felt like. I don't understand what happened to my life. Austin slumped back onto the couch, head in his hands. 3 weeks ago, I had everything. A successful business, a loving wife, a social circle, respect in the community. Now I have nothing, less than nothing. You have this house for tonight. Austin looked up at me with something approaching hope. Dad, I know I treated you terribly. I know I made horrible mistakes about who you were and what you meant to me. I'm not asking for money or business help. I just need someone to talk to, someone who remembers when I wasn't a complete failure. The desperation in his voice was absolute. This was no longer the arrogant son demanding his inheritance or the desperate businessman seeking investment connections. This was a broken human being who'd lost every relationship that mattered to him, sitting alone with the father he'd betrayed. I'm listening, I said finally. Monday evening brought a different Austin to my door. Not the arrogant businessman from weeks ago, not the desperate supplicant seeking money, not even the broken man confessing his losses. This Austin stood on my threshold with something I hadn't seen from him in 30 years. Genuine humility. Dad, I know I have no right to ask anything from you, he began, his voice steady but quiet. I'm not here for money or help or business connections. I just want to apologize. Really apologize. And maybe ask if there's any way you could forgive me. I stepped aside, letting him enter the living room where our relationship had been destroyed and might possibly be rebuilt. Austin remained standing, as if sitting would presume too much familiarity. I've been thinking for 3 days straight about everything I did wrong, not just recently, but for years, decades even. He looked directly at me, no longer avoiding eye contact, as he had during previous visits. I treated you like you were my employee instead of my father. When you sacrificed to send me to Stanford, I acted like you owed me that education. When you gave me money for my business, I treated it like an investment I deserved, rather than a gift from someone who loved me. I sat down, but said nothing, watching him struggle with words he'd never spoken before. The house. That was the worst thing I've ever done. Austin's voice cracked slightly. You raised me in that house. You kept it perfect for 30 years, maintained every detail, made it a home, and I sold it without even asking your opinion, let alone your permission. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was trying to process something difficult. I called you dead weight, Dad. I actually used those words to describe my own father to Sarah, the man who worked 16-hour days so I could have music lessons and sports teams and college prep courses. Austin's composure finally broke. You were never a burden. You were the best father anyone could ask for, and I was too selfish and arrogant to see it. The silence stretched between us. Austin waited, not pushing for a response, seemingly prepared for rejection. I lost everything because I deserved to lose everything, he continued finally. Sarah left because she realized she was married to someone who could treat his own father like an inconvenience. My friends disappeared because they saw who I really was underneath the success. My business failed because I was too proud to maintain the relationships that mattered. Austin moved closer, not sitting, but kneeling beside my chair, a posture I hadn't seen since he was 8 years old and had broken my favorite lamp. I don't want your money. I don't want your business connections. I don't even want you to fix my problems. His eyes were bright with tears he wasn't trying to hide. I just want my dad back. I want the chance to be the son you deserve to have all along. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something I recognized, the $15,000 check he'd given me, now wrinkled and worn. I kept this as a reminder of the worst moment of my life, not losing Sarah or the business or the friends. This moment when I tried to buy off my father's love with pocket change. Austin placed the check on the coffee table between us. I understand now that no amount of money could repay what I owe you, not for the sacrifices, not for the love, and definitely not for the pain I caused. I looked at the check, then at my son kneeling beside my chair like a penitent seeking absolution. I know I have to earn your forgiveness, Austin whispered. I know it might take years, or maybe it's impossible. But if you'll let me try, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I understand what family really means. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of the antique clock Austin had always complained was too loud. Now he waited in that silence, not demanding an answer, not pushing for immediate reconciliation, just hoping for the possibility of redemption. I studied his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or self-serving motivation. All I saw was a broken man who'd finally learned the difference between success and worth, between taking and giving, between entitlement and gratitude. Wednesday morning, I made my decision. After studying Austin's face for 2 full days, watching him return each evening just to sit quietly in my living room without asking for anything, I concluded his transformation might be genuine. "I'm going to offer you something," I said over coffee. "Not charity, not a handout. An opportunity to prove you've actually changed." Austin looked up from his untouched breakfast, hope flickering cautiously in his eyes. "I need someone at the Sunnyvale location for basic maintenance and cleaning. $6 above minimum wage, full 8-hour days. You'll be working under Marcus, taking instructions from employees who know the business better than you do." "I'll take it." The response was immediate, without negotiation or questions about the work details. 1-week trial. If you prove you can handle honest work with the right attitude, we'll discuss whether this arrangement continues. Austin nodded, understanding this was a test rather than employment. We drove to the car wash in relative silence, both of us aware that this week would determine whether our relationship had any future. Marcus showed Austin to the equipment room, explaining his responsibilities: sanitizing vacuum stations, restocking supply dispensers, maintaining tire shine applicators, and general facility cleaning. Nothing glamorous, nothing requiring business acumen or strategic thinking, just honest, physical labor. The first day was brutal. Austin struggled with the industrial vacuum systems, fumbled with chemical mixing ratios, and moved with the inefficiency of someone unaccustomed to manual work. By lunch, his designer polo shirt was soaked with sweat and spotted with cleaning solution stains. "Your hands are soft," observed Maria, one of our detail specialists, during the afternoon break. "You've never done this kind of work before." "No, I haven't," Austin admitted without embarrassment. "I need to learn. Could you show me the proper technique for applying the protectant solution?" Maria's eyebrows rose at his respectful request for instruction from someone he would have previously dismissed as staff. She spent 20 minutes demonstrating proper application methods while Austin listened attentively and practiced until he got it right. Thursday brought improvement. Austin arrived 15 minutes early, wearing work clothes he'd purchased the previous evening. His movements were more efficient, his technique cleaner. When a customer complained about water spots on their luxury sedan, Austin apologized professionally and personally redetailed the affected areas without being asked. "That was well handled," I mentioned during our brief encounter at the office computer. "The customer deserved better service than they received," Austin replied simply. "It was my responsibility to fix it." Friday afternoon, the regional manager from our corporate accounts made an unexpected visit. Austin was cleaning windows when the manager approached him with questions about our service capabilities for fleet vehicles. Instead of deferring to management or pretending knowledge he didn't possess, Austin politely explained his role and located Marcus to provide proper information. He remained helpful without overstepping boundaries or trying to impress with connections to ownership. "New employee seems solid," the manager mentioned to Marcus later. "Professional attitude, knows his place, handles customers well." Marcus agreed. He works hard, doesn't complain, takes instruction without attitude problems. Good addition to the team. Saturday brought our busiest day, with 3 separate wedding parties scheduling premium detail services. Austin volunteered for overtime hours, working alongside teams to ensure every vehicle met our standards. He spent extra time on tire detailing, interior conditioning, and final quality inspections. "You're getting the hang of this," said Carlos, our lead detailer, as they finished the last car. "Your dad taught us all to take pride in the work. Looks like you're learning that too." Austin paused, towel in hand, processing the comment. "He's a good teacher. I just wasn't ready to learn before." By week's end, Austin had transformed from struggling amateur to competent team member. His hands were calloused, his movements efficient, his attitude consistently professional. More importantly, He displayed genuine respect for the work and the people who did it daily. Friday evening, as we cleaned up after the last customer, Austin approached me with something I hadn't seen in years. Quiet pride in accomplishment earned through effort. "Thank you for this week," he said simply. "I learned more than just car care techniques. I watched my son secure equipment and check supply levels with the same attention to detail he'd once applied to business spreadsheets." The arrogant executive was gone, replaced by someone who understood the dignity of honest work and the value of earning respect. Sunday afternoon, as Austin cleaned the last vacuum station with the same care he'd shown all week, I made the final decision. Justice had been served, transformation had been proven, and it was time for complete honesty. "There's something important we need to discuss," I said as he finished organizing the supply room. "I've asked James Chen to meet us at his office this afternoon. There are some family business matters to resolve." Austin nodded without question, his trust now complete. During the drive to James's office, he sat quietly, no longer demanding explanations or trying to control situations beyond his understanding. James greeted us with the warmth of someone who had witnessed our entire journey. "Roger, Austin, I have the documents prepared as we discussed." "Before we address legal matters," I said, settling into the familiar leather chair across from James's desk, "Austin needs to understand the complete truth about everything that's happened." Austin's expression grew attentive, but unworried. The week of honest work had given him confidence that, whatever came next, he could handle it. "The bank pressure on your loan wasn't coincidental," I began. "I initiated that review through my relationship with Harrison. When you sold my house and called me dead weight, I decided you needed to learn some difficult lessons about character and consequences." Austin's eyes widened, but he remained silent, processing this revelation. "Every business meeting I arranged was designed to fail. I shared your family behavior with potential investors, specifically to destroy your networking opportunities. The social isolation you experienced was the natural result of people understanding who you really were. You orchestrated everything." Austin's voice carried wonder rather than anger. "From April 8th, when I overheard you planning my disposal, until this moment. Every setback, every rejection, every loss was carefully planned to teach you what you clearly hadn't learned through 38 years of privilege and success." Austin leaned back in his chair, the magnitude of the revelation settling over him. "The systematic sabotage, the perfect timing of each disaster. You planned my complete destruction." "I planned your education," I corrected. "The man who walked into my house 3 weeks ago was selfish, entitled, and cruel. The man sitting here today understands the value of honest work, the importance of family, and the difference between success and character." James watched our exchange with professional discretion, having prepared for this moment through multiple conversations about family reconciliation and business planning. "I needed to lose everything," Austin said slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. "The business, Sarah, the friends, the social status. None of it was real. It was all built on money and connections rather than character." "Exactly. And now that you understand the difference, we can discuss your actual inheritance." James pushed a folder across his desk. "Austin, your father has restructured his will and business holdings. Instead of simple inheritance, he's offering you partnership in the car wash operations." Austin opened the folder, scanning documents that outlined a gradual ownership transfer based on performance and character demonstration over the next 5 years. "You'll start as operations manager for the Northern California region," I explained. 15 locations generating approximately $2 million annually. "If you prove you can handle the responsibility with the same integrity you showed this week, we'll expand your role." "Dad," Austin's voice broke slightly. "After everything I did to you, everything I said—" "You've earned this opportunity," I interrupted. "Not through inheritance or entitlement, but through genuine character change. The man who kneeled beside my chair asking for forgiveness, who worked humbly alongside employees he once would have dismissed, that man deserves a chance to build something meaningful." Austin studied the partnership documents, understanding that this wasn't charity, but opportunity to prove himself on a larger scale. "James helped me establish protections ensuring you can't simply inherit wealth without earning it," I continued. "Every advancement requires demonstrated competence and character. You'll build your financial security the same way I did, through hard work and smart decisions." "This is more than I deserve," Austin whispered. It's exactly what you deserve now, that you understand the difference between taking and earning. I stood up, extending my hand to my son. Welcome to the family business, partner. Austin rose and clasped my hand, then pulled me into the first genuine embrace we'd shared in decades. Thank you for loving me enough to teach me these lessons, even when I didn't want to learn them. Thank you for becoming the man I always knew you could be. James smiled as he witnessed the completion of the most unusual family reconciliation of his career. Shall we sign these partnership agreements? As Austin picked up the pen to formalize our new beginning, I felt the satisfaction of perfect justice achieved through love rather than revenge. The arrogant son was gone forever, replaced by a man worthy of the Young family name. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.